Today is August 16th, and we have a very special Talkin' Yanks. Ryan Ruocco is joining us. Let's talk some Yanks, man. Easy.
Talking Yanks with old John Boy.
Ryan.
John Boy and Jake. Recaps galore, weekly awards, stat lines, theme, and hot takes. Get your Yankees news from these two fine dudes. It's time for Talking Yanks. Talking Yanks with old John Boy. John Boy and Jake. Talking Yanks with old John Boy. John Boy and Jake.
Hello and welcome back to Talkin' Yanks, a special midweek edition. Myself, Jake Storielli, BBD on the ones and twos. John running around today because we got a lot going on in the dog days of summer. And who's coming in out of the bullpen? But Ryan Ruocco. Rooks, how you doing, man?
I am doing terrific, Jake. I am thrilled to step in for Jimmy today. I'm thrilled to work with you and see all the frogs on your shirt.
Yep.
And I'm ready to go, man.
Yeah, you probably know our guy, yes, Bosch, huge frogs guy. When we crossed that bridge, that was a special moment. To a couple Italians from the tri-state area that have kind of a weird frog thing. That was a special moment with our Yankee path. Enough about that for the people. How are you doing, man? What's going on with you? I know you at WNBA are playoffs coming up soon? What's going
Playoffs
on?
Playoffs start Wednesday. I will do Liberty against Chicago, and then I'll do game 2 of that series as well, and then I'll do a game Sunday either in Seattle or in Connecticut. So big opening week to start. We have a new format this year. Playoffs are earlier than normal because 1 out of every 4 years they're this early because players go to play in the Euros afterwards. So yeah, man, gearing up for it. Go right from Yankees diving into W playoffs, and then the W playoffs this year actually end before the baseball regular season even ends. So then get back on the train in time for October.
Beautiful. So are we? Do we know when we're seeing you on Yes next? Are we figuring that out or what?
We don't know as of now. My schedule was very much I wouldn't even say front loaded. I'll say mid loaded because of the playoffs being earlier this year, and Yes being kind enough to accommodate that. So like normally I would be doing probably the Angels and A's series, right? Like I usually do West Coast, but this year Michael will go and do those series because it falls smack in the middle of WNBA playoffs. So there might have been like a series or 2 earlier in the year that Michael normally would have done that I did instead. Yeah. So at this point, it's kind of like wait and see, hopefully be a part of the playoff coverage. And if something pops up before then, where the schedules align, then I would jump in there too. One thing I am doing is I'm doing another radio series, filling in for John in September in Toronto.
Okay.
So yeah, so looking forward to that. I always love working with Susan. So yeah, man, I'll be back involved, but for a little bit, people will have to catch me either doing W playoffs or R2C2.
All right. Well, yeah, and dude, I know you said you just recorded, and I know I just saw on Instagram Big C just dropped off Karsten at Georgia Tech, man. Holy smokes, dude.
I know. You know what's so funny is like the first year I met CC was 2009, and we hit it off right away. And the thing that was striking to me and then my colleagues with the Yankees, Brandon Mim and Pete Gurgley, was how accessible C was. And we've seen that, play out now in his post-baseball life, and we certainly saw that in his veteran years. But, think about he was in his 20s, prime age, just signed the biggest contract by a pitcher ever, and was so just, welcoming, and to the point that he had us, when the Yankees went to Oakland, he had us do a shoot at it, or he allowed us to do a shoot at his house in Oakland. And it was like the only off day they had during his first trip back to the Bay after signing this deal. They had a barbecue with all these family over and meeting all his cousins, aunts, and uncles, and everything. And he was so shy, and he was, I think, maybe like, geez, I don't even know how old he was. Maybe he was 4, maybe 5 years old. And I remember I was just, engaging him in a little conversation, and he was like too shy to answer. And his sister, Jaden, was like, "Lil C, the man asked you a question." And so I always think of, now it feels weird even calling him Lil C, but Karsten as like that little boy who was shy to answer questions. But meanwhile, he's a, 6'5" strapping young man about to go play baseball at Georgia Tech and starting college this week. Pretty crazy. And I know it's emotional for C.
Yeah, dude. And I remember, we've come across CC briefly, and we all know him from social media and all that stuff. And obviously being a Yankee, the one that always stuck with me, Marcus Stroman, because the other one who I'd say behind the scenes, but is coming to the front of the scenes, Amber Sabathia. I remember when Marcus Stroman said on R2C2, he just said, "She's the realist." And that's who that whole family is, man. Like, they're going to shoot you straight. You get real social media. You get Big CC being emotional, dropping off his son at college. And it's not just kind of some of that generic stuff that you see athletes like going through the motions on social or something. And that's why I think R2C2 has been so great.
Thank you, man. Thank you. Yeah, like, I think the number one word, if someone were to ask me to describe CC in one word, I would say authentic, because he does not put it on for anybody. All of us, most of us at times are going to chameleon a little bit to the room, to the audience, whatever it might be, not necessarily while losing ourselves, but just like a little bit of that. With CC, this is who he is, and, if you're in his good graces, if you're, someone who he trusts and values, he is, very much going to vibe with you, but he's never going to feel like he has to have everybody, in the room liking him. Like, that's not him. He's very much, this is who I am. I'm authentic to that. I will, very much express what I truly believe and think, and whoever wants to accept that can, and whoever doesn't, well, forget him. And I think that there's something that people really appreciate about that when it comes to CC, and not trying to curate things, but instead just trying to be very comfortable with being his authentic self.
Yeah, he's the best, man. And Ryan, I told you before, midweek episode, we usually do a little sharp stats. Usually whatever conversation is big in Yankees land. I think the newest one is Estevan Florial, a guy who's been around Yankee land for a long time now. I guess, and it used to be funny whenever the Yankees went into a little bit of a drought spell, whatever you want to call it. Me and Jimmy would stumble into almost we'd call them State of the Unions, where it's like, all right, we're addressing the Yankees fan base. The times obviously aren't their best. So I guess in a mini State of the Union, how are you doing with where the Yankees are at right now? Because it's, Garrett Cole keeps winning me over in press conferences. His last night was awesome. You could see the frustration coming through him, but also like, we did earn the right where we have a 10-game lead in August that some of the stuff we don't love right now, we can't get fully mad at, but we're the Yankees, so we do. So I guess, how are you doing with where the Yankees are at right now?
Yeah, I think Garrett is awesome with the perspective he lends in post-game interviews and whatnot. It's fascinating listening to him, because he really gives you, I think, more of a window into sort of the psyche and the decision making of a pitcher than almost anybody, which I find fascinating. And I agree with what he said last night about, look, this is the right you earn by, or maybe it's not a right, but you understand what I'm saying. When you build a lead like that, you can afford to have something like this and still be okay. So I like to look at things through the context of, am I worried about them achieving their ultimate goal? My old radio co-host, Robin Lundberg, who now is sort of the face of Sports Illustrated and does wonderful work, and for me is one of the most unique thinkers I've ever known. He used to always say, is this a fatal flaw? And so I like to look at things through the prism of, does this team have any fatal flaws right now, right? It's not about, are you scuffling? Are you going through it? But are there things about the construction of the team that we would deem to be fatal flaws, meaning something that will keep them from being able to win a championship? And I'm not at the point where I see anything and I say definitively, that's a fatal flaw, they won't be able to win a championship. I'm not at that point. So that keeps me overall pretty tame. The reason I'm not at that point is I still want to see what the offense looks like when they get Stanton back, which is a massive difference. We all know this. We even saw it in the ALCS 19 when Stanton was dealing with what he was dealing with, how much different it felt when he was in the lineup or not in that series with the Astros. And that was a dude who was kind of on one leg at the end of that series and still made that big of a difference, just the way it felt having him in there. I still want to see that. I still want to see what the bullpen looks like once Severino is back and the possibility of Britton as well. I am curious what the team looks like with Bader if he does get back. You know, those are things that give me some hope here. The things that concern me is it is very hard to have 4 or 5 outs in the lineup in October. You know, you need to feel like you have some hits coming from places other than 1 through 4. And right now, you know, DJ's toe complicates it. What Rizzo just went through with the back complicated it. No, Stanton complicates it. But you have 3 guys who you kind of need at least 2 of them to hit in some way who aren't hitting, in Donaldson, in Torres, and in Hicks. I think Kiner Falefa kind of is what he is offensively. And if everybody else is going right, then what he brings can be okay, kind of rounding out the order. But if they don't, then it's a problem. And what you get from catcher has always kind of been a bonus. Yeah. That's not why those guys are in there. Trevino's giving you more offense than you could ever hope for, but I don't think you can ever rely upon that. So right now, if you're not getting production from Hicks, Torres, and Donaldson offensively, I do think that's a problem for the lineup. So the question is, you know, is this kind of what we saw from Hicks in May, but then saw a turnaround in June and July, what we saw from Torres in April, but then saw a huge turnaround in June and May before the All-Star break? Or is this what you're going to get? And if this is what you're going to get, that's a problem. And that's a question that I don't know if you can feel totally and completely confident in. And that my biggest issue before was thinking about the rotation and throwing out a true number 2 behind Cole in the playoffs. But right now it's thinking about too many landing spots in that lineup for really good pitching to navigate.
Yeah, that's I kind of do the same mental game with the lineup where depending what's going on down there, Higgy's been really good of late and Trevino's had an amazing season. He's an all-star catcher that our catching position that was supposed to be, a quote unquote hole in the lineup / anything from there was bonus points has actually been pretty nice. That if that were to fade, and then you're right about IKF, like it's a contact bat that we've talked about. I think offensively, I think Yankees were hoping there might have been a leap, but his numbers are pretty close to the player that his Baseball Reference said he was. And you're right, when everything else is there, it just does get nervous because, every playoff series, there's going to be 1 or 2 guys that isn't locked in. And so if you start... Yeah. That can easily then become, the second half of your lineup, which you're right. In a playoff series, whenever you have that, it just feels like it puts so much pressure on the top of the lineup when that spot comes back up that, in the 7th or I think we saw last night, the 8th inning, when if they don't come through, you feel a little defeated. I think you're right about the bullpen too. Like that's going to sort itself out. It's just who. Like you just mentioned, Zach Britton. Like, we'll see.
Yeah. I mean, and look, I don't feel like 100% certain that they're going to have enough trusted arms in the bullpen to feel confident in their ability to navigate October. But I also don't feel sure that they won't, because could a combination of Chapman, who's obviously looked much better, Holmes finding it a little bit, Efros, Trevino, maybe Severino, Peralta, and Britton. Could that be enough quality arms to get you, the outs you need in October? Yeah, I think it probably could. I always look at it, I feel like you need 3 to 4 arms in the bullpen in October that you feel good about coming in, that you feel like you trust. If you can have that, and inevitably one of them will fall off at some point during the run, but like in 09, right, you thought Hughes was going to be one of those guys, and then Hughes struggled and kind of fell out of that circle of trust. But then it was Jabba who actually ended up getting big outs for them out of the pen. It was Jabba, Marte, and Mo. And Mo obviously is the crown jewel that no one can ever compare to. But I feel like if you can get to a place where you have 3 guys, and I'm not certain that they can't get there. If Holmes can find it a little bit, I think Boone is right in the fact that like Holmes hasn't pitched as much, and like sometimes you need a little more consistency with action when you're talking about a sinker baller, and they can run into troubles if they don't. Chapman, is a guy you're always going to be a little nervous about, with a lead, trying to lock down the final 3 outs of the game, but has looked good enough lately that I feel like he'll be one of those 3 guys. And then could someone else, step up if Holmes doesn't find it? Can it be one of the guys at the trade deadline? Could it be Britton? Could it be Severino? So I'm not ready to ride that out, to write that off completely yet. I don't feel sure that the bullpen is going to be where it needs to be in October, but I also do not feel certain that it will.
Yeah. It's, Aroldis Chapman, a lot of people were ready to run away from him, and now he's been our best, best reliever for 2 weeks. So that's the bullpen. So yeah, you've got enough lottery tickets out there that 1 or 2 should cash in, and hope you're right. Like that should not be, when we're doing Talkin Yanks in October or hopefully November, that hopefully that's just a good thing. Hopefully that's just a good thing. Let's our Sharp stat, Katie Sharp sent it in. It actually has something to do with the offense. So while we're kind of around there, we can bring it back that way. And the Sharp stat is brought to you by Trade Coffee. I always say, there's a lot of coffee drinkers out there, but not everyone drinks the same coffee. Everyone's got their different flavor to it, and Trade Coffee has 450 different kinds of live and ready to ship every day. So what you do is you go to Trade Coffee. You're going to take the quiz there. You might find out what you like on the fly. And when you do, they are going to send you a couple bags of coffee, and they have their first match guarantee. Trade is so confident they'll find the match for you the first time that if they don't, they'll take your feedback, and an actual coffee expert will work with you to send you a new bag for free. They've already delivered 5 million bags of fresh coffee with over 750K positive reviews. Right now, Trade is offering new subscribers a total of $30 off your first order plus free shipping when you go to drinktrade.com/Yanks. That's 40 cups of coffee for free, people. Get started by taking their quiz at drinktrade.com/Yanks and let Trade find you the coffee you'll love. That's drinktrade.com/Yanks for $30 off. Are you a coffee guy, Rooks? Do I know this?
I'm not a huge coffee guy, but if I was, I would totally be ordering from Trade. Like there's no doubt that's where I would be getting it from.
Bang. That's it.
But I am actually I'm a big tea guy. So that's That's what I have right here, my Sound tea.
Ooh.
This is my go-to. Yeah, sparkling, delicious. So free advertising for Sound.
Yeah, double up. All right, let's kick it to Katie Sharp stat. Beebs, you got it over there?
I do. 1 second.
Beauty.
Hey guys, Queen of Stats here. And yeah, the Yankees are still in a massive slump. And specifically what I want to talk about this week is the lack of production on offense since the All-Star break. It's been really glaring. They're 8-15 since the break. And in that span, as I take this on Monday night before the Rays game, they are 16th in runs per game, 23rd in batting average, 16th in OBP, 13th in slugging, and 14th in OPS since the All-Star break. That's not a winning formula, obviously, for the Yankees, But what is really more interesting to me is that they're doing this while their best player, Aaron Judge, is on an absolute tear. And it is pretty crazy to see the numbers of how much he is carrying this team since the All-Star break. So since the break, Judge is hitting .372 with a .524 OBP, a .936 slugging. That's a 1.460 OPS, if you're counting at home, with 13 homers, 30 RBIs, 22 runs scored since the All-Star break. All right, those are tremendous numbers. Now, to put that into perspective, I looked at the percentage of those numbers as the team's totals, and I compared that to every single player in the majors since the All-Star break. Now, in that span, Judge has just 12% of the team's plate appearances, which is pretty normal, but he has 31% of the team's RBIs, 22% of the team's runs scored, 37% of the team's homers, and 16% of the team's hits. Now, since the All-Star break, those are easily the highest rates by any player, the highest percentages by any player since the break for those four stats compared to the team totals. So it's just ridiculous. And now for the season, he's doing this as well. Obviously, he's about top 4 in all those stats as a player's percentage of production for the team. But one thing I did want to just highlight is to show you how much he is carrying this team for the entire season on offense. Is if you look at offensive WAR, wins above replacement, just for offense, so taking away defense, and you look at the difference between the first and second place player on each team in offensive WAR. The difference for the Yankees between Judge and its LeMahieu is 3.44 wins, which is easily the highest for any duo on any team. And the next one is, I believe, 1.5 wins. So there you guys go. Judge is absolutely trying to bring this team to the finish line, and I really, really hope he does it.
Awesome. Thank you to the Queen of Stats, KT Sharp. Yeah, that was artwork. So the topic there is that Aaron Judge has been carrying the Yankees offense. I mean, I don't think that's the shock of it. It's the comparison to the rest of the team, and she kind of ended it with a little Batman Robin type situation of who's your number 2 guy. And Ryan, you mentioned this, and I'm not going to say it's a good thing, but it's always a good thing when Yankee fans appreciate Giancarlo Stanton, which I think a lot of them are doing right now. But I'll kick it to you. I mean, I don't know if you want to talk about what it's been like watching Judge from the booth, or his dynamic to this offense, or who needs to kind of step up on the Yankee side.
Well, I mean, I think, I certainly have thoughts on all aspects of that, but first and foremost on the Judge stuff, it's just been amazing. This has been the greatest offensive season I've ever seen in my life. When I think about like truly special, memorable offensive seasons, I think about A-Rod in 07 is the first one I think about, where I remember just watching him day in, day out, and I was just like, this is ridiculous. It's like watching him, you just went to the ballpark expecting him to do something special every single night, and he was. And I think he had that in 05 as well, which he won MVPs both those years, where it was just like a different feeling watching him game in, game out like that. But Judge this year, I would say, has even exceeded that because the home run total is just so preposterous. And he has obviously an extremely legitimate shot at getting to 60. And the way it's affected me in the booth is just, it's like this massive sub-story where it's like, Aaron Judge is always must-watch TV, but it's like no matter what's going on in our broadcast, like there has to be like a zoom, like honing of focus every time he walks into the box, because this is an event. And this is a very unique event. And Aaron Judge can go on to have a brilliant additional decade of baseball in his career. And he could be performing at an MVP level for the rest of his life. And he may never have a year like this again. Like, this is so special within the context of a great player. So it's just been amazing to watch. And I think, it just helps support the MVP conversation even more when you consider those numbers that Katie Sharp laid out there, Jake, because like the difference between him and everybody else is pretty remarkable there.
Yeah, and it's I think that segues into kind of the rest of the guys a little bit, because it was for a while the story that was developing kind of every episode we had was DJ was kind of coming. DJ was getting on base a lot, and then he was starting to hit a lot, and the fact that he was doing that in front of Aaron Judge was that was a double win. That was that was splitting the cards at the table, and you get ace and you got 2 winners instead of 1, because he was getting on base at a like 450 clip in front of a guy who's going to win the MVP. So I think, as we circle Stanton, I mean, the importance of DJ and what he was doing and what he'll continue to do when he's back and healthy is huge. But I guess with the rest of the lineup, Stanton, I mean, that guy has earned with his postseason performance, like, the Yankee fans hate this August stretch of, are we necessarily putting our best foot forward every day? If there's a guy that's earned that, it's Giancarlo Stanton, because as long as he's been on a postseason field, his performances have been otherworldly. I guess is there another guy in the lineup? Like Glaber's in a little funk right now. Everyone keeps waiting for Donaldson to click. Do you think there's, or maybe it could be the new guy, Benny, that's kind of was brought in to be a lineup extender? Is there one of those guys that you're circling that's kind of the guy that can kind of unlock the Yankee offense again?
I think that the guy that I look at, I think there's 2. I think Benintendi, I agree, is a guy I look at as a lineup extender, and he has not performed up to this point, but his track record is so rich, and his approach is so sort of normally focused that I do have some faith that he's not going to be a guy who you look at as an automatic out in October, right? Like he's a guy who I still have a faith in when it comes to just like giving a tough at bat in a big spot. And even the other night, right, we saw him get a really big double. We've seen him get some big hits, even though he got off to a really tough start. So he's a guy who I actually do have some faith in as being sort of a lineup shaper or a lineup rounder outer, if you will. And that's the guy I look at that I have the most faith in. The one that I think may be most important, I mean, look, LeMahieu, Judge, and Stanton and Rizzo are non-negotiables.
Right.
You need those guys here and going if you're going to win. Period. The end. I have full faith that those guys are going to do that. And then no matter what, when they get up in October, you're going to say like, okay, this guy's giving me a shot. And you're right about LeMahieu and the amazing season he was having and putting together, especially after kind of a tough start, results-wise at least, before this toe thing. But Glaber's the guy I look at. Glaber's the guy I look at because we've seen him perform in October somewhat consistently. Even in 2020, when he struggled in the regular season, he had a big playoffs. And I don't think he's a dude who's affected by the moment at all. I'd like to say Donaldson, because in his life, when he's been healthy, he's hit. But this season now, basically all season, he has not hit. This isn't just like, he's had a rough week or so. It looked like he was about to find it, had the big game against Logan Gilbert, and he still hasn't, So for me, it's hard for me to look at Donaldson and say, hey, I expect offense to come when it has not come for now, what are we, 5 months into the season? Like, so I can't say I think that's going to definitively come. Hicks, has had some extended good stretches this year, but not enough to the point where I could say, I fully expect him to be, an offensive producer. Torres is the one that I look at and I say, I know it's in there. He showed it was in there for a 2.5 month stretch this season. Will we see it again when it matters most? And I do have some faith that is possible. And I think that's the guy I look at and say that is necessary. How about you, Jake?
Yeah, Glaber's always the interesting one for me because Glaber, I mean, we talk about highs and lows. You're 21 years old, you're on the New York Yankees, and you're kind of lighting it up, and then that continues into the next year. The shortstop stuff goes down. It just doesn't click. It just didn't happen. Whatever it was, whether mental, physical, or somewhere in between, I think people can make arguments all around that. Man, you talk about a guy who's got a little bit of a playoff resume for him, and it's Gleyber Torres in 22 games, 325, 413, a 988 OPS. And one of the things I always think about, and I don't think this should be shots fired at all because I think athletes need to be more open about it. I think Gleyber hears things. I think he's young. I think he's on social media, and I think that's fine. I think that's our whole generation. But I do think... I think around the deadline when there were some Pablo Lopez rumors or even Soto rumors, I do think Gleyber heard those a little bit, and I think that sent him into a little bit of a funk. I'm not worried about him because he's had a really nice year. He has the postseason numbers, and I think what he does so well, we always joke about it because the scouting report when he initially came up was they were like Gleyber's just good. And it was like, okay, so does he have good power? Does he have good contact? Does he have good speed? And pro baseball scouts just said, this guy's good at baseball. And I think he's a kind of a B plus at everything when he's right. And I think when the playoff lights are on, I think he kind of tells himself like, this is the playoffs. I'm going to do my thing. And I think that works for him. So I'm not too worried about him. I think dog days of August, which are very real for I think for baseball fans even. I think Gleyber's got a little bit of that I'm not too worried about him. And Donaldson's just the flip a coin, man, because I love his defense. I love his fire. But you're right, now at this point in the season, it hasn't been like Hicks's baseball reference is wild right now. You'll see two of the worst months you've seen a baseball player have, and you'll see two really solid months from a good MLB outfielder that I don't know what you do with that. But Donaldson, it's just been flat. That I think Yankee fans are starting to give up on the expectation that the bat's going to click this year, which is so wild for a guy that's got an MVP in his basement.
Yeah, I think that's right. And also you don't think like even though he's 38, you don't think like, oh, he's done or over the hill because you see the way he's defending and you're like, okay, well, the body's still firing defensively exactly as you would hope it would. I look at what he brings offensively now as a bonus. And if he brings something great, but I think it's a large enough sample size this year that for whatever reason he has not hit, that I think it's hard to sit here and say I fully expect him to come around. Like this is the back of his baseball card, because if it was April or May, okay, maybe even to June, but now you're mid-August and this has been what he's been all year, so it's hard for me to say that. Gleyber, I feel differently because he had like a dramatically poor start and then an extended period of looking like a really quality major league hitter. So the one thing with Gleyber though is like his at bats to me have lacked some awareness lately. Yeah. The one that I think about most is in Seattle after the young reliever the starter turned reliever who has great stuff, got a little wild, walked someone. And it's, I forget what they had in that extra inning, if it was bases loaded, 1 out, or I think it was bases loaded, 1 out. And he's 1-0, guys just walk somebody and he chases a pitch out of the zone, swings and misses. And it totally changes the at bat. And I think and if you watch his at bats lately, I can't remember the last time he saw a fourth pitch in it at bat. Yeah. He is swinging so early. And look, I understand the value of aggression, and I understand, everybody just wants people to take a strike forever. And that's actually not smart to just perpetually take a strike. We know this, and analytics departments would laugh you out of the room if you just always were from the school of like, take a strike. Right. But there are situations where it makes sense. And if you're going to be swinging on the first or second pitch over and over and over and over again, and either, making weak contact or putting yourself in a worse count to get a pitch to hit, we probably need to rethink some things a little bit. And I think I feel like some of the at-bats lately from Glaber just have been they felt a little mindless, like, oh, I'm just going to go up here and swing. And I think that is sort of compounded problems for a guy that has shown it's still in there. If Glaber was performing like he is right now all year, on top of what we saw in 2020 and 2021, then I would have no expectations for him to bounce back and be a valuable part of this team, because I would have said, look, this is the third straight year where this guy has been a sub-average offensive performer. Why am I going to expect that? But this is a guy who played like an all-star for more than 2 months. And I thought it a legitimate argument. Aaron Boone talked a lot about feeling like he didn't get enough, buzz for being an all-star the first half of the season. So I think like he's the guy who I still have the most hope for there offensively to join Rizzo, Stanton, DJ, Judge, and then Benintendi, I have more faith in than anybody else outside of those four to just be a guy who's going to give you quality at bats and lengthen lineup a little bit. Torres is the guy who I look at and say he's going to kind of have to need to be someone who makes an impact. I think anything you get from Donaldson and Hicks is a plus, or center field if that's Bader if he comes back healthy. And then Kiner Falefa is what he is, and Trevino or Higashioka, go do your thing defensively, and if you provide a little offense, great.
Yeah, I think you nailed it right at the end there. Benintendi is he's going to be Benintendi. It could be 6 for 15 in a playoff series. It could be 4 for 15, but he's going to give you kind of Benintendi at bats. Like he kind of knows who he is at this point, where Gleyber Torres is a guy that can change a series. Like if you've got 22 games where you're almost 1 dot and OPS wise, whether that's coming from the 6-5 hole wherever he slots in. And yeah, kind of tying it to Donaldson at the start. If he finds himself in there, the defense has been so good that there is an appealing 7th hole playoff Josh Donaldson. If he could find a couple games that I know it's going to make me salivate, and I'm sure it makes some of the Yankees front office salivate.
Well, and the one thing about that too, Jake, is at least with Donaldson, what you do have no matter what is I do think, if he's hitting 7th, you have all the other hitters healthy. I do think he's not like a, easy landing spot for opposing pitchers, right? Like they have to still make sure not to make a mistake to him. So that's an area where he still provides some value.
Yeah. I love it. And Ryan, I want to talk to you a little bit about, you mentioned Hicks. Estevan Florial is a popular name in Yankees land for the past either 48 hours to 4 years, depending how you want to measure it. Before we do that, this is brought to us by DraftKings. They're telling us college football is back. What? It's August. It's insane, man. The time and the years just start moving quick. And right now at the DraftKings Sportsbook, you can bet $5 and get $200 in free bets instantly. Win or lose. They've got their same-game parlays. Rack those up if you know what you're doing and get a bigger payout. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app now and use promo code JOHNBOY. Bet just $5 on any college football and get $200 in free bets instantly. That's code JOHNBOY, only at DraftKings Sportsbook. 21 plus in eligible states, but ages vary by jurisdiction. Eligibility restrictions apply. See DraftKings.com/sportsbook for terms, resources. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER in Tennessee. Tennessee Redline, 1-800-889-9789. New York, 877-8-HOPE-NY, or text HOPE-NY. One per customer, minimum $5 deposit and wager, $200 issued as 8 $25 free bets. Whew. Ryan,
you did it.
I got there. I'm not the Mink Man. I admit it. He's got me beat. Ryan, we love peeling back the curtain because that's kind of what Talkin' Yanks is, and the people appreciate. I asked you beforehand if you want to chat about this, and you're like, yeah, absolutely, because it's a conversation in Yankee land. Estevan Florial, and by the way, I mentally started cracking up earlier because what's the topic in Yankee land right now? Good defense at center field, where 2 weeks ago, Brian Cashman happened to trade for one of the best defensive center fielders at the deadline, and none of us were too happy about it. It's funny. He's probably walking a little taller down the hallways these days. Estevan Florial, as like I joked about, he's a guy that a lot of Yankee fans know. It's one of those things with prospects nowadays. We almost knew about him too soon, probably, because we just heard he's this toolsy kid that is going to need reps in the minor league. But if it comes together, it should be pretty. And the COVID year happens. He had another injury in the minors that it was kind of like, all right, the name faded a little bit. He's put together an incredible AAA season, high OPS, like everything's there. That, this is a guy that if you had told probably the Yankees front office that they would have a 24-year-old Estevan Florial putting up these kind of numbers, that, they probably would have thrown a party. So it gets tricky with roster construction and everything like that. But I guess kind of where are you at with Florial? Do you force him in? It gets tricky, but I don't know. Do you want to see the kid play? Well, I think we all kind of do, but it's tricky.
I'm looking at him right now, his numbers. So he still struck out 122 times at AAA, right? Am I looking at that right? His numbers this year?
I can double check for you.
I think he's 284, 365, 487, 852.
Yep.
With 122 strikeouts. He has the speed, obviously, with the 32 stolen bases. Here's my thing with this stuff. And I think that, there are times where a fan base could be right about it being time for a minor league, or maybe before the organization wants to. Maybe they're so close to it that they have different reasons for not doing something. But I think for the most part, normally, organizations know their minor leaguers a lot better than we do, because we just are not exposed to them with the same level of data that they are, right?
Sure.
Or experience, or we're just not. And I think that when I look at Florial, I think that if the Yankees really believed that him over Hicks was going to make a big difference, I think they'd do it. I do. I think they would do it. Now, do we want to see him get, 2 weeks and see how it goes? Okay, but here's my thing. If you really believe Bader is coming back anyway, and that in the playoffs, Bader is going to be your starting center field, and there's a chance that you might, lose Florial, so to speak, if you bring him up for 2 weeks, he just happens to struggle, and all of a sudden it kills his confidence, which he's rebuilt now over a really strong minor league season. Like, is that worth it? Is that worth it right now for 2 weeks in August? Is that worth it? Because the division is not on the line here. Everything is geared towards building the best team in October. So again, and I think the Peraza situation plays into this a little bit as well. A lot of people want to see Peraza at short instead of Connor Falefa. Like, this team is going to win the division. Is it fair to put Peraza in position to be a difference-making piece to win a championship right now? Like, is that the case? If you think that's the case, if we think that margin, that increase on the margin, that enhancement on the margin is going to be the difference between winning a World Series or not, then you have to do it.
Right.
And then you have to bring up Florial, right? Like, absolutely, no questions asked. But if it's not, is it actually maybe setting those guys up for failure? Because now all of a sudden they're being looked at as a time, like, this isn't a low state. When Gary Sanchez was called up in 2016, the Yankees were not playing well. Right. And with his acclimation. Same thing goes with Judge at that moment and Austin at that moment, right? Like, they weren't being asked to take a really good team over the top to a championship team. They were being asked to just play because there wasn't anybody better in front of them at that moment, right? I even think about Cano in 2015, replacing Tony Womack at second base. I mean, in 2005, 2015, 2005, like, where you were like, none of us have really heard of Cano, but at that time the team looked like a mess in April. And you were like, all right, let's see. I think it's a hard spot for us to put Oswald Peraza or Estevan Florial in to say like, hey, we know this team's going to win the division. They're going to be just fine. But we think we may need you to win the World Series. By the way, if you're Peraza, you have no big league experience. If you're Florial, you have just a smattering. Look, if you actually believe that that's going to be the difference, you have to do it because there's one goal and one goal only, and that's win a title. But if you're pretty convicted that like they're not quite ready for that yet, then I do think you have to weigh whether or not that's a fair spot to put them in.
Ryan, sometimes there should be more than 140 characters on Twitter because that was pretty good, man. That was pretty good.
A lot of characters. It was a little too many characters, but I appreciate that.
Because Florial, I mean it's on the nose. It's especially with the Bader factor, and we're talking postseason. Right. It's the Yankees. We're up 10 games on the division in August. It should be talking postseason. Like even if Florial came up and goes gangbusters, what's your best case scenario? Does that mean he's the 5th outfielder on the roster come October? And what does that really mean? The Peraza thing, which obviously has been a hot button topic, I guess it's where the Yankees, I think, are slightly different. Sports are keeping up with the Joneses. It's always you look at who won and you try to take what you can from there. And sports are copycat, like at Golden State and shooting threes or whatever it may be.
Yeah.
I looking at the Atlanta Braves and the Astros, they have called up some young guys. The Houston Astros called up their young, top 50 ranked shortstop to start the season and let them roll out there. And I don't know. Again, I have no idea where these guys were at coming out of AAA. I'm going to assume Jeremy Pena was more ready to go than Oswald Peraza. The Braves have called up now Michael Harris, who's killed it in center field. Vaughn Grissom gets called up the other day. He's a stud. Some of their young pitchers that I don't know. And that's why it's become such a popular conversation. I wonder if the Yankees would have loved if there was a chance in June to call up Peraza for 3 weeks to see what it looked like. I do. And baseball doesn't always work like that. Here we are with a 10-game lead in the AL East, which a lot of people thought would be one of the toughest divisions in baseball, as it usually is. Never mind the Baltimore Orioles. How about them?
Yeah.
that you're right. I mean, there's it's got to be some heavy conversations in there.
And Jake, not to cut you off, but
please.
You just said something that resonates with me. I want to be clear too. Like, if you get to a point where you're just like, hey, look, like the performance isn't good enough right now from these positions in order to win. We just need to figure out it might be better here. Then that I get doing that. You know what I mean? Because you can't, like, if you're pretty convicted on the flip side that, hey, like Kiner Falefa and Hicks aren't going to give this team enough to, win a World Series, which I'm not in that place, but let's say they got there, then I get saying, like, give it a shot. Like, let's see. But maybe it's also in September. Maybe Peraza gets a start here or there, and it's like, hey, see if it goes well, But you are right, Jake. Like, there is the flip side of it. If it's like, well, okay, like, but what if these guys really do well?
Right.
Like, because this team may also be in a position where it needs an injection of life, and maybe these are their only options to get it. So I don't want to say it's silly to suggest it, because I think there's a lot of merit in probing whether or not it is appropriate. I just also think that the downsides could be strong. And I think Bader being, the guy who you're looking at as going to be the center fielder, unless if Bader's health situation is like, look, he's probably not coming back this year, then it changes that equation as well.
Yeah. No, it's it's a classic. Is the grass greener on the other side? Or, would we go into October with, we just broke IKF's heart because he got benched for the last 3 weeks, and the kid came up and he felt the pressure.
It looked like it was his first 2 weeks in the big leagues.
He felt the pressure of a World Series team. That now you went from a shortstop to now then we'd be having three-way debates about IKF, Peraza, and if Marwin should be our shortstop. So it's all the stuff that Brian Cashman has to think about, that when we're firing off our tweets, we don't necessarily have to. That like I kind of started this portion of it. It's so funny that Hicks Florial is a conversation when we're 2 weeks removed from why did we get Harrison Bader? Where I think when Yankee fans watch that dude play center field, I think we are gonna, not eye-opening, but whoa, because that's who he's supposed to be out there.
I'm itching a little bit to get the Hicks Florial thing out there. One, the Bader factor is huge. It sounds like the plan, if he ends up healthy enough, is for him to be the center fielder, I guess, in the playoffs. And even if that doesn't happen, I think the Yankees would shift Judge back to center in a playoff scenario. Right. We like that. He was the center fielder for a really long time. And on the minor league side of things with Florial, who the tools are cool and all that, he's had a good minor league year, big step up. Since the All-Star break down there, it's been big slumping. Bad for him. He's batting average is .222. It's a .638 OPS. He's striking out 40% of his ABs. It's a 71 WRC plus. Right now it's not going great for Florial, so I'm not sure it's the time, and they have the options coming or on the roster right now. Praz is a different conversation. We've done that a lot, and Florial, it's his last year. He can be in the minors. It's like he can get time to play every day, and next year, this offseason, big decision time. But
that's a good point. That's a really good point, just to consider the recency and the struggles of that too, and how that factors into it. I want to know the timetable on Bader. I feel like we haven't gotten any clarity on, like, people just kind of say, like, yeah, if he's available. Well, is he going to be available, or is he definitely not? Or do we have any sort of like knowledge as to when he might be? Because, that changes a lot.
It's been such a vague, September, and nobody's said anything really official.
Yeah, that would be nice to know. Sometimes they can be I don't know if you've seen this, Ryan. Sometimes they can be a little coy about their injury report.
I've seen that from time to time.
Yeah, and it's Beebs, you were on it, and Ryan, you alluded it to with the strikeouts. It's could the Yankees? There's two ways to phrase a sentence. Sometimes it's, could the Yankees call up their uber talented center field prospect to give him the chance after he's having a good year, or do the Yankees want to bring up a slumping, strikeout prone center fielder while he's slumping to quote unquote save the team? Those are two very different scenarios that are actually the same one.
Very true. And that's probably what they're debating right now, maybe if it was Peraza in center field rather than Florial, maybe it'd be different. Maybe he'd be here right now. But because Connor Falefa isn't the same, issue at short that right now center field is for the Yankees. But I'm curious, like, they got Bader to be their starting center fielder. So, let's see when he might be back, because I think his impact defensively, assuming he's not inhibited by this foot injury, could be really stark.
Right. That's I had a man. This reference might hit a couple people. It'll probably miss a lot of people. It was kind of like our prime time, kind of early college or right before Boondock Saints. When it comes out, they're he's trying to figure out, and he switches the guns, and he comes across his face, and he kind of figures out what happened. I think we've been thinking about Harrison Bader as the 7th through 9th inning guy, and I think that could still be a real possibility. Obviously, a defensive replacement, that makes sense, right? But I wonder if it's we've seen them do it with the catchers and even IKF at times. If they really are worried about the center field defense, does Harrison Bader start? If he's hitting good, if he's not, does he become a a pinch hit option for a Donaldson or someone like that during the playoffs, a Carpenter, and then you sub in, Judge can play center. So it's almost like it could
reverse of it.
It could potentially work either way. I don't know. Bader's that's a little wild card to this season.
Yeah. And it's another piece, like we were talking about before, where it's why I can't be convicted in saying these problems are not solvable. These problems that they have right now are concerning, but there is a potential for some of them to be, addressed with players coming back. No guarantee, but there is some potential. Jake, the one thing I know, this is not a tangible thing, but like earlier in the year, this team had incredible, palpable confidence.
Yeah,
they had a swag. They were beating the tar off of teams, right? Like Leighton. I mean, they were just crushing teams, going in, stopping them out, or if they were down, they were coming back. Walk-off win after walk-off win, right? Like they were doing everything you would want a team to do that just like knows it's going out there, it's going to take care of business. And that's why they won a gazillion series in a row. And they were sweeping teams, finishing off those series, unlike last year, something Judge even talked about. Right now, I think they need a little mojo injection, like I don't know how that happens, but they need something psychologically too to make them believe they are that team that was almost 40 games over 500. Like they've had some of their personalities zapped, and you only get it back with winning. And it's one of these weird symbiotic relationships of what comes first. But that to me would make it'd be something that I'd be wondering about adding in one of those young minor leaguers about. Like, could they help inject just a little juice, or is it going to happen naturally from, just getting players back? Like, is it going to happen from getting Stanton back? Is it going to happen from getting Severino back? Is that going to give you that life that you need?
Yeah, and that's the whole, if Peraza came up and he was the glove first guy with pop and speed, could that from the 9-hole, like I remember when Glaber first came up and what he was doing from the 9-hole seemed to flip the lineup. So that's where that gets appealing. Or I think the other thing, and we don't know about Yankees injuries and everything like that, but when Giancarlo Stanton's hanging out in the outfield yesterday and he says he's feeling good, and when it's time to get dressed, he doesn't, and everyone else does. You wonder that effect on the guys in the middle of August in a losing streak. Like there's a mental side of this game that Yogi had figured out before everyone, that I think it makes the dog days very real. That you just wonder when they're coming out of it, because they're gonna. It's just when.
Yeah. Yes, I agree. It's going to happen at some point. It's just when, and that's not to dismiss the concerns people have right now, because there's things to be alarmed about. But like for the vast majority of this season, the offense was the best in baseball. It's missing a couple key hitters. Let's not forget the injury to Carpenter either, who had become a big part of the offense, right? Then the pitching was the thing that really was faltering. The starters have found themselves again, right? Nestor now has put together a month of great starts again after his little skid. Cole, you don't worry about. Sometimes I worry that he's going to have to be, flawless for this team to win a World Series. But for the most part, you don't worry about him, right? Even if he has a couple bad outings. And Montas, I'm not worried about, as far as him just, being a starter you can rely upon. And Tyon's pitched better of late, and Herman's pitched well. The bullpen, I think, is something I worry about a little bit. Just like what we were talking about earlier, like that's something where I'm like, okay, make sure you kind of figure things out before October, because what was a massive strength has now become a liability of late. And there were a couple critical injuries. Like the Michael King injury is huge, huge. And that's one of my concerns, where it's like, you kind of feel like you need Britton to come back and be that dude, or you're going to need Sevy to come out of the pen and be outstanding.
Yeah. It's concerning. You hope, there's still it's such a ridiculous sport, Ryan. I mean, there's still so much that's going to be so much of this season that's about to be rewritten. I mean, does Marinaccio come back and look like
that's true too.
The guy who had 17 shutout? Does Clark Schmidt come up and become the sixth man, and he has a little run there where we're talking about him as a long guy out of the bullpen? A name that you haven't mentioned, and he hasn't deserved to be mentioned yet, but 2 in a row clean last night. Jonathan Loaizaga. He was supposed to be this guy. It hasn't looked great, but with a bullpen guy, if this guy puts up a September, I'm going to drink a little of that Kool-Aid. So there are so many options out there that it feels like it has to come together. But on August,
that's a good point.
On August 16th, I don't know.
That's a good point, though, Jake. If Loaizaga could become the guy that he was last year, that changes things a lot. Yeah, and I think all of this kind of like falls back into the category of, there's nothing to make me believe what this team wants to achieve is off the table now. I still have a lot of confidence in them. I still have a faith that they're going to figure it out. There is some figuring out that needs to be done, but there are still pieces there that can do that. And, we'll see whether or not they do, but there's enough quality arms there that you're not dismissing that they can.
Yeah. Ryan, I can't thank you enough, man. On short notice, you came in basically perfect game. I didn't
I don't know about that.
I didn't see any holes in it. Dude, thank you. Thank you so much. You short notice, you came on. I think the people deserve to know this, that you came on short notice and you said you had up till 3 basically, and we brought you to the buzzer. Part of the reason I don't feel off about it, because, man, I think you like talking Yanks too, and you're pretty damn good at it. So, Rooks, I can't thank you enough. Good luck with the WNBA playoffs. Go kill it. It sounds like we'll listen to you in Toronto, and I'm sure we'll probably see you somewhere else along the way. So, R2C2, anything else we need to tell the people about?
No, let them know. WNBA playoffs start Wednesday, August 17th on ESPN. We have all the games. They're going to be awesome. So follow along for that journey. And thank you for having me, man. I'm a huge fan of you and Jimmy and your work and everybody at John Boy Media. And you're right. I do enjoy talking Yanks, especially on Talkin' Yanks. So this was great.
That's perfect. Ruocco, thank you. Everyone tweet at Ryan. Tell him he's the best. And yeah, I mean, tell him grandma, let's go Yanks.
Go Yankees.